Ever since the war started between Azerbaijan and the Armenians last year, culminating in one sense in the 9-point agreement or truce in November 2020, I have basically posted a few reflections, 18 in all, via YouTube about my thoughts, my ideas, my perception of how things were, not only in the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, but also between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. But today I realize that we've moved into a different terrain. Now the issue is no longer one where a diasporan Armenian would basically sit down comfortably in his chair in front of the computer somewhere in the world and start dishing out his thoughts or his advice or his perception of how things are between Armenia and Azerbaijan, or for that matter, in the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, known also as Artsakh for Armenians. Why? Because we are entering critical stage in this conflict. And it is important for the people who live in Nagorno-Karabakh, who live in Armenia, to be able to give their opinions. We in the diaspora, the overwhelming majority of us, with some exceptions, I'm sure, are not as cognizant, as aware of all the details of what is happening. So half an advice is worse than no advice at all. This is why today, for my 19th episode of Nagorno-Karabakh, I'm going to slightly change tack. As you've noticed, I'm posting my episodes less frequently for the reasons I just stated, but also I'm going to change a bit in the way I look at this conflict and at the situation today and hopes for the future. Instead of saying, I think this and I think that, I'm going to highlight for you a few links, a few articles, a few interviews, a summary of some of the issues that are happening today. You can always go into the description box, choose which ones interest you, and then click on the link or read what's being said or listen to what you're being told. All this happening from the perspective of people living in Armenia and knowing full well the situation there, the good and the bad and the ugly in all its ways. So, having said that, and having welcomed you to this number 19, I'm going to start slightly tangentially. My first link, or the first reference I'll make today, is not directly related to the war over the enclave of Karabakh, nor the simmering tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Rather, I'm going to talk about an article that refers to the years 1904 and 1908, when present-day Namibia was the German colony of Southwest Africa. Now, as it happens, I researched this topic when doing my postgrad law studies in public international law, so I know a little bit about it. Now, the reason I'm introducing this link in the description box is firstly because Armenians the world over commemorated the anniversary of the Armenian genocide only 3-4 weeks ago. And this article refers to a genocide that actually took place before the Armenian genocide. And it is, in matter of fact, the first genocide of the 20th century. This is when tens of thousands of peoples indigenous peoples died as colonial forces brutally suppressed uprisings by the Herero and Nama tribes, killing many and driving others into the Omahike desert where they starved to death. Do you already see the similarities with Armenians? Survivors ended up in camps where they were used as slave labor, dying of cold, malnutrition, exhaustion, and violence. In fact, as many as 80,000 Hereros living in German Southwest Africa at the start of the colonial rule are estimated to have perished, as well as 10,000 Nama people. Now, interestingly enough, Germany formally acknowledged that the genocides it perpetrated constituted acts of violence, crimes against humanity, genocide. And this happened in 2015. And it has been negotiating a restorative justice deal with Namibia that would set a global precedent. So I'm sharing this article with you, not in order to take you back over 100 years, but to establish a nexus, a causal link between the first genocide of the 20th century and the one that followed immediately afterwards, the Armenian genocide, and the hopes of Armenians for recognition, for restorative justice. It could well be that this might be helpful for some of you. So the article is entitled, "What's the right price to pay for genocide?" And I hope you get something out of it. Now, the second link I want to put in the description box is an oldish interview that was done by mediocrity of CivilNet TV with Professor Nerses Kopailan. Professor Nerses is professor of political sciences at the University of Nevada. And he spoke about the possibility of a truth commission that would look into what happened during the war between Azerbaijan and Armenians. He explains in this interview how objectivity would be maintained, how Armenians can help set this initiative up, and whether there is any kind of commission in the region, any precedent that would help the setting up of this commission. So again, the Truth Commission should also be called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because I'm of the firm belief that truth leads into reconciliation. No truth, no justice, no justice, no reconciliation. So if this were to happen, and if this is something that is still being bandied about, then listening to this interview with Professor Nerses Kopailan is, in my opinion, quite an interesting one. Then I also want to share with you a presentation, a talk that was given by Astvatsaturian Turncotte. Now, Anna gave this presentation at a forum organized by the Armenian Church in the UK and Ireland, and it basically talked about the issues of hate speech, Armenophobia, and demonizing Armenians in Azerbaijan. As a Baku Armenian herself, she had a lot to say about what she went through until she ended up in the United States and remade her life, how difficult it was, and what kind of support she got or did not get from Armenians in Armenia and across the world. It's a very interesting presentation, and I commend you to look at it as well. Then I want to go to elections. As some of you might know, and as I have mentioned in my previous YouTube episodes, Armenia is gearing up for parliamentary elections next month in June 2021. And it seems that all the former presidents of Armenia, from Levon Ter-Petrosyan to Kocharian to Sargsyan, are fighting with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in these forthcoming elections. So I want to share with you a link that would go into this aspect of the elections, because it's quite interesting. The old regime, the older regime, the oldest regime, and the new regime, all of which evoke positive and negative sentiments by Armenians across Armenia and the diaspora, how this is panning out, and what are the motivations of all those people who've decided to fight in the parliamentary elections. And I can tell you, from the little I know, the motives are quite different from one person to another. And finally, and perhaps most critically for today, I would like to refer you to the tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Syunik region and the Sevlich, the Black Lake. Why? Because Azerbaijani forces moved into the Armenian-held territory by some 3.5 kilometers, and this basically created more tensions at a time where things are pretty iffy in that region as a consequence of the recent war. This encroachment led for Armenia appealing a few days ago to the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, to hold consultations on this border dispute. This is serious. This worries me, because it could well be that this is an indicator of Azerbaijani aggressive moves. And given that Armenia and Azerbaijan were both part of the Soviet socialist entity, two of the republics, before communism died out and they got their independence, borders aren't that clear. And therefore, a few miles here and a few miles there, and people could argue for and against on both sides. But the region is a region that is critical, that is strategic, and that is actually also quite beautiful. So this short piece by Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty might give you an indication of where we are on this. This is all. I'm not going to add anything more today. Short and sweet, you might say, with a sigh of relief. But I would commend you, I would encourage you to watch, listen, and then think about these links and these topics that I've raised with you. They might sound quite unrelated, but actually you can easily join up the dots. And that would give you an idea as a diasporan Armenian, perhaps even as an Armenian living in Armenia itself, of how things are moving, whether forward, whether backward, the political tensions, the forthcoming elections, the encroachments and aggression, the thoughts about what constitutes genocide and how can you establish restorative justice, how do you basically set up a truth and hopefully reconciliation commission. All these are basically food for thought. And I hope that you would find them useful. And I end up today, this different tack, I end with a quotation by Eric Hakopian, who is with CivilNet TV as a presenter, as a writer. He's got his weekly political insights. Something he said that struck me, and I can't remember where he said it, when he said it, but he said it a while back. He talked about the road out of hell. hell being where Armenians got themselves into as a consequence of the defeat of the war with Azerbaijan. He said, the road out of hell, and I paraphrase, necessitates, requires cold-blooded pragmatism, dedicated hard work, and a hatred of mediocrity. These are very, very difficult benchmarks, but hopefully those articles would not necessarily help with the pragmatism, the hard work, and the mediocrity, but they would point out on our own compasses the direction of travel for the future and for the welfare of Armenia, for all of us living in the diaspora, and of course for those living in Armenia itself. So thank you very much for sticking it out with me, and I hope you have a nice Sunday, which incidentally is Pentecost Sunday for most churches, including the Armenian Orthodox and Catholic churches today. Take care.